If you're one of these types of people that really just wants to just take souls and really make your competitors very, very, very unhappy and miserable, just be successful. I'm Michael Mogill, founder and CEO of Crisp, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. I've built my business through practice, not theory. Crisp started with just $500 to my name and has grown to over 8 figures in revenue over the last few years, earning a spot on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America. Our approach has been to take everything we've learned about generating massive growth within our own organization and help the country's most ambitious and committed law firm owners do the same for theirs. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with innovative market leaders from the legal industry and beyond to learn from those who thrive in the face of adversity, challenge the status quo, and define what it means to be a true game changer.
This is Jessica, Head of Coaching Strategy at Crisp, and today we're flipping the script for another special edition episode to get Michael's take on why imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, why haters are just confused admirers, and how to transform envy into fuel for improvement.
If you're getting criticism, you're probably doing something right, and you're probably leveling up in some way. And guess what? As you continue to level up, you're probably gonna get more of it. So get used to it, but use it as fuel.
That's coming up on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. All right, thanks for joining another AMMA.
Here we go. I'm excited. Man, this is gonna be a fun one. I always enjoy doing these. This morning, I gotta tell you, I had an experience that I've just been reflecting on ever since. So I'm driving into the office and I see this grown man rollerblading in the parking lot.
Of Crisp.
Yes.
Oh,
In our outside parking lot,
Yeah.
I see him rollerblading. And my first thought was, this guy's figured it out. Here I am, pulling into the office. We've got our morning huddle. We've got our team meeting. And this guy, not a care in the world, just rollerblading all over the place. I mean, I don't know, maybe he has some sort of mental illness, or maybe he's just figured it all out.
Maybe he's just loving life. Yeah.
Yeah. So I looked at that and I was like, this guy's got to figure it out.
Goals.
And maybe I'll go out and get some rollerblades. Maybe I'll go out and start, doing pirouettes in our parking lot as people are rolling in.
Maybe we'll start rollerblading to the office.
Yeah, could do that. There was a time where rollerblading was cool. I don't know what happened. Rollerblading got phased out, but there was a time you'd be very, very cool rollerblading. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here for the AMMA. You guys submit your questions and we answer them. And you can text us at 404-531-7691. This is not the only type of episode that we do on this podcast. We also have our traditional interview format. We bring on experts from various industries. We pick their brains, provide all their insights on this podcast. We've had incredible guests. We have an incredible lineup of just guests coming this season as well. And then we've got our encore editions where we bring back some of our most popular episodes. So sometimes there's an episode we did 3 years ago that may resonate even more strongly with you today. Somehow these episodes perform better when we bring them back. So that's why we continue to bring them back, because you guys give us great feedback. But this is the AMMA. And last thing I'll say on this is that you may notice we don't run any ads on this podcast. So we do that so we can say whatever the hell we want, and our guests get to say whatever they want. It's free technically. It's not free to produce, but it is free to you, the listener or the viewer, if you're watching this on YouTube, for example. All we ask is that if you get any sort of value from this episode or any other episode of the podcast, that you go and leave us a review, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, and this just helps us book better guests and reach more people. And with that, Jessica, what do we got this week on the MMA?
All right. I think you're going to love this one. Responding to competitors. All right. So first question this week. I recently discovered that a competing law firm has copied several elements of our marketing strategy, including our website design and social media content. This is frustrating and feels like a direct attack on our brand. What should I do?
Yeah, imagine that.
Isn't this flattery?
Most definitely is. So I'm sure everybody listening to this podcast, if you have not already, you will at some point in your career experience somebody copying what it is that you're doing, especially if it's working, right? Or it appears that it's working. Whether it's the way your site is designed, your colors, your fonts, your marketing message, whether it's something you're putting up on social media, anything. Like sometimes it's going to be a direct rip. They just changed a few words. Sometimes they don't even change a few words. Sometimes they're just shameless. I mean, we've had situations where literally they will take the exact thing exact thing and just slap it on their domain. And sometimes they just change like the headline or the name of the firm, for example. But, and you look at that and you have a couple options. Now, you can have this emotional, visceral reaction of saying, how could they do this? I'm going to make them pay. And so you reach out to other lawyers, the business lawyers, and you're saying, I'm going to send them a cease and desist, or I'm going to get legal with them. And you're welcome to do that, right? If you believe that they've infringed on, a trademark that you have or any sort of content that you have copyrighted in some way. I mean, for sure, absolutely, you can do that.
That's the best use of your energy.
Yeah, you could absolutely do that. Or there's an option number 2, and you can just get better. And what I have learned is those that are copying you are never the ones that are innovating and leading. And by the time that they've copied you, so long as you've not had your last great idea, you should always be further ahead and on to the next great thing. So you should always be iterating and innovating and improving. This happens to us all the time. People copy everything we do. But by the time they're done copying, we've already moved on to the next thing. And we've continued to push forward. So in some ways, I'm grateful for it because it's a nice forcing function to continue to innovate and to continue to improve. And it's also recognizing that you're going to have imitators.
Yeah.
I think that's just a part of being successful in business. And just because someone doesn't have an original thought in their fucking brain doesn't mean that you have had your last great idea. I mean, we come across people literally where you think there's an in and outs of creativity there at all. It is literally someone looking at something and they probably don't even know why it's working. They just figure because you're doing it, it must be working. So then you can even be, maybe there's option 3, you could be sinister. And you can start putting things out they're going to copy that don't work. It's just like if you ever want to catch a rat, right?
Yeah.
Like in your organization, start spreading a rumor that isn't true or tell someone something that, is not true and see if it starts to circulate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's a fun experiment to try.
This is similar to that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it's unavoidable. And I think it's instead, if you look at it from the standpoint of, all right, well, here's what we need to do to get better, or what can we do to continue to innovate and improve, then the copycats are always going to copy, but they're never going to be as successful as the innovators.
Right. Yeah. You should actually be grateful for them. Like you said, it's a forcing function to make yourself better.
Absolutely.
All right. Question number 2. I have been more innovative in the way that I run and market my law firm. I'm proud of the attention it's gathered, but I hear other attorneys in my community are critical of my approach. How should I respond?
Oh, this is great. Oh, you grouped these well. So like the first one, we got the imitators.
Yeah.
The second question,
Got the haters.
you got the haters. So the haters, I said this at a summit in 2022 at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And I said that, haters are really just confused admirers. So when you are doing something, it's bringing about some sort of criticism because you stepped outside of the norm. I mean, what's the saying? It's like, if you don't want criticism, do nothing, be nothing, say nothing.
Yeah.
You could just blend in with the furniture if you'd like, and you can avoid all criticism. But then you're never going to achieve your goals and you're never going to achieve any significant amount of success. So criticism in many ways, and again, you have to differentiate between criticism that's constructive, that's coming from someone that, you trust and is looking out for your best interests, versus somebody who may be a direct competitor, in which case that criticism could be just envy in disguise, right? They just envy you. They envy your success. It makes them sick. It keeps them up at night. It bothers them. It makes them uncomfortable. And as you continue to succeed, they will come up with reasons in their brains, in the little, tiny bird brain, for why they are not successful, but it's because you either had some advantage, you got lucky, you had some opportunity they didn't have, the timing was there, wasn't there for them, like whatever they will justify so that they can excuse their lack of taking risk, their lack of effort, the lack of work that they put in, the lack of investment. They just need excuses so they can feel better about themselves. Because God forbid that you did what you did, working your ass off and making tremendous amounts of sacrifices and trade-offs and taking on a tremendous amount of risk and doing things the entrepreneurial way, and it paid off for you, and things that they were not willing to do, you did. And now you're successful, but that can't be the reason. They can't tell themselves that the only reason they're not successful is because they're not willing to either put in the work or take the risk or make the necessary investment. No, because then it would be their fault. It can't be their fault. So when you are getting this sort of criticism, there's a couple things you can do, okay? I'll share a recent example. And recent can be sometimes like yesterday.
Oh yeah, I was wondering if you were going to go there. All right, I think I know where you're going.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
And my response has evolved over time. So I'm still very immature, but I've become, thankfully just guy of you, which will be illustrated in this story. It was this week. And I saw somebody, I was getting text messages from people and they're like, hey, have you seen this? Somebody's put out this messaging where they're hosting an event and they're basically saying that like all the things that you guys do at your summits and your events, they're not doing because that stuff is nonsense or BS. And they're saying that their event won't have any type of card giveaways, no celebrity speakers, no DJs, no nothing. It's just going to be substantive. And they're like, have you seen this? Because I think they're talking about you. I said, well, I don't, first of all, I don't know if they're talking about me, right? They could be talking about all sorts of stuff. I don't know, right? Most of the time, they're probably not talking about you, right? We just personalize a lot of things. But I looked at that and I laughed. And I was like, okay, well, number one, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Number two, the fact that they're pointing these things out means that we got their attention. So my first inclination, my first kind of, what I wanted to do was I wanted to share our event with the messaging that they had, but just flipped, of saying that we have celebrity speakers and we have DJs and we do give away cars and there's still, BS, whatever someone would consider that, sure, right? If that's what you consider that, and just lean into it. And as I was ready to make the post, you said, hey, you know what? Don't do that. And I said, well, why not? And you're like, what's the point? And I reflected for about 2 seconds. I said, you know what? You're right. And this happens 99.9% of the time where I'm about to respond. And then I think, you know what? Who cares? Why even acknowledge it? The best thing you can do is just get better yourself and focus on yourself. I think that if you really wanted to get even with someone, if you're one of these types of people that really just wants to just take souls and really make your competitors very, very, very unhappy and miserable, just be successful, right? Nothing will make somebody even more unhappy and dissatisfied than seeing you succeed. And that's the single best thing you can do. And I love when these things happen, because as soon as I see it, I'm like, oh man, they don't even realize what they did.
What a blessing.
What a blessing. It's true. It absolutely is true, because now it makes me want to double down and produce something even better. It's like, it's the fuel. That's how I use it, right? It's like fuel that we can use and deploy in actually leveling our own game up. You kind of woke up a sleeping giant, because before I was just doing it this way, maybe at like, a 7 or an 8. Now I'm doing it at a 9 or 10. Then you do it again. Now I'm doing it at an 11. Mike Tyson had this interesting quote. He would he would cry before his fights. And they'd be like, Mike, why are you crying before, it's a boxing match? It's like, why are you crying? And he's like, I'm crying because I feel so bad for the boxer I'm about to go up against and what I'm going to do to them. I feel bad for them and I feel bad for their family. What a savage. And I sometimes feel, somewhat similar, where when I see something like this, I sometimes start to feel sorry for the person on the other end because of what now we are inspired to do, right? Of how that will affect them, right? I feel bad in some respects. We still do it, right? I mean, it's just the nature of the game. Welcome to business. The answer to this question essentially is that you control your response, and you can either get into some kind of back and forth debate, some sort of nonsense, which I don't think is very productive at all, or you can use it as fuel to get better yourself. And if you really want to get even with someone, if you really want to destroy your enemies, if that's important to you, and once you mature, you won't even care about that, right? You just want everyone to succeed. Basically, someone else succeeding doesn't mean that you can't succeed as well.
Correct.
Someone else getting a case doesn't mean that there's less cases out there. There's an abundance of cases out there. There's an abundance of success out there. And when you can actually be happy for someone, like when I see someone do something, let's say they're putting a conference together, a legal conference or an event or something, I want it to be successful, because if it's successful, I know what goes into doing that. I know like the work that's involved. Like, we know what it takes to fill a room, to actually put together a great experience, to put together a valuable event. And if they're doing that and they're willing to pay the price of what that takes, it's like, I respect that.
Yeah.
I want them to succeed.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So if you're getting criticism, you're probably doing something right. And you're probably leveling up in some way. And guess what? As you continue to level up, you're probably going to get more of it. Yeah. So get used to it, but use it as fuel, and use it as fuel to improve and focus on your own business and your own team and how you can better serve your clients and ultimately make a greater impact. And if you do it that way, it's very productive. And then one day, you can write, handwritten thank you notes to all these critics because they've inspired you to do your best work.
Yeah. And it's all a matter of where you put your energy. You could put all your energy into focusing on them, or like you said, put your energy in yourself and double down. All right, to round us out today with question number 3, I find myself constantly comparing my firm's success to that of a highly successful competitor, which is leading to feelings of inadequacy and frustration. Have you ever felt this way? And if so, what did you do?
For sure. I think everyone feels this way to some extent. Wherever you are today and wherever your law firm is today, there probably was a time earlier in your career where that was the goal. And you thought, if I could only get it to this point, I would be just ecstatic. Yeah. And let's say your goal was to get your firm to $1 million. As soon as you got to $1 million, you saw somebody else had a $2 million law firm. So now you felt inadequate. And now you're like, okay, we got to get to $2 million. Then you get to $2 million, see another person got a $5 million firm. And then 10 million, then 20, then 50, then 100. And there's always, then you're comparing yourself. I mean, I have come across billionaires that feel inadequate around other billionaires because they have 1 billion and this other billionaire has 2 billion. Comparison truly is a thief of joy, right? If you're playing that game. But the other thing to recognize is that this is all a game of your choosing. And you decide in terms of if you're constantly going to be comparing to somebody else, you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, this is going to be a recipe for dissatisfaction. That's one thing I think, to leverage it in a way where it inspires you to do greater work and you're not complacent, so you always want to do better, you want to improve. But that only works really, I mean, at least in the long term, is if you're measuring against yourself and you're trying to achieve your full potential. But the other thing that a lot of people don't see is, like, let's say there's a competitor, as this person's asking, and it seems like they're just doing so great and everything's so amazing. You don't really know that. You know what you see, or at least that's what you base your assumptions on. You don't know if that person whose firm appears to be succeeding is even profitable. I've known a ton of firms on social media that market themselves as these great law firms, but they haven't made money in over a year, multiple years, and they're hanging on by a thread. You also don't know, like, let's say maybe their business is succeeding, but then this person, the kids don't even know their names and they're going through a divorce, or maybe this person also has a health issue. You never know what's going on in someone's life. You don't always know if you actually would want to trade places with them. And there's more than what you see, pretty much always. So whether that success is really true success in terms of, let's say, the financial success, or what about all the other aspects of their life in terms of like how they spend their time? You don't know the amount of stress they're going through. You don't know the problems that they're facing on a day-to-day basis. It's interesting, like, even since the early days of CRISP, even before CRISP, when I would see somebody succeeding, in some respects, maybe there was early on, maybe I did feel inadequate because, I was bootstrapping this business, and here we're in Atlanta and there's a lot of like VC funded companies and all these tech startups, and, we're trying to compete for talent, and, they're all funded and we don't have any money, and it's like, how are we going to grow? And you just feel you're constantly being overlooked. But that inspired us to double down and build a really great organization. But I guess on the other side of that is when I'd see somebody succeed, I was inspired by them. I'd look at it and say, well, if they could do it, I could do it too. I mean, it's a human being, right? Flesh and blood, right? It's like, what skills do I need to develop? What information, what do I need to learn? How do I need to execute? How do I level up my game? So you can look at it from the perspective of, okay, if they can do it, surely you can as well. And if you start giving yourself all this nonsense, BS excuses of like, well, technically, like, they had this, happen to them, and, you just start rationalizing all this shit, you're not helping yourself, okay? At the end of the day, they found a way. You can also find a way. And maybe it was the daddy or the granddaddy or, whatever, their business, whatever. But the reality of it is that if you are in America, you have a college education, you've got an advanced degree, you have an opportunity to succeed, and you have an opportunity to achieve great things. And for every person you see out there that you believe they have some reason or excuse that they're successful that you are not, there's another person who had way less than you that did way more. So start looking at it that way and start getting inspired when you see people actually achieving things and creating things and innovating and growing and developing. Like, just respect the process, because that's not easy to do. And if you've ever done it yourself, you understand the trade-offs involved in that, and you understand the stress involved in that and the problem solving that's required in that. And you have to realize that somebody else is overcoming those challenges themselves, especially as they continue to level up. So I think instead of looking at it from the standpoint of like, I'm inadequate, be inspired and say, if they can do it, I can do it. And start doubling down on yourself and your own skills and capabilities. Also recognize that the grass isn't always greener.
No.
Sometimes you really don't know what is really going on in that law firm or in that person's life. And if you actually knew, chances are you probably wouldn't trade places with them.
So true. So I think all of these, really, to round it out, is how you respond. So, all right. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Thanks, guys.
You've been listening to the Game Changing Attorney podcast with Michael Mogill. If you found this episode valuable, here are 3 free ways that we can help you grow your law firm. Number 1, download the first chapter of Michael's book absolutely free at gamechangingattorney.com. Number 2, you can shoot Michael a text at 404-531-7691 and ask him any question you'd like. You might just hear the answer on the next episode. And finally, number 3, if you can leave this podcast a 5-star review, it will help us gain access to more influential thought leaders and bring their lessons learned here to you. For more information on this episode, see the show notes in your podcast app or visit legalpodcast.com.